Hello Year 5 and welcome to Week 7 Tuesday's maths session. We're going to be continuing looking at number bonds today in mental maths, but we're actually going to be looking at number bonds to 1 and 10. So what we're going to start with today is looking at the question, what do I need to add to 0.34 to make one whole? So we can see here we've got 3 tenths and 4 hundredths, so we can also read this as 34 hundredths. So almost thinking back to yesterday, we know that 100 hundredths make one whole, so if we've got 34 of them, how many more do we need to make one whole? So we're going to begin on the number line again today, and we're going to think about the fact that we are wanting to, first of all, before we worry about getting to that whole number, we're going to want to think about, first of all, about getting to the next 10, which is 0.4. And we need to add here 0.06. We need to add 6 hundredths to get to the next tenth, which is 0.4. When we're on 0.4, we then need to add another 6 tenths, which is 0.6, to get to the next whole number. So our answer then, we can see it over here, we've got 0.6, so we've got 6 hundredths, and we've also got 6 tenths, and altogether that makes 0.66. And if we have a little look here, again, we're thinking about why is it not 0.76, seeing 3 and 7 tenths to make a whole, that actually that would be too much. We'd end up with 1.1. So it's 0.06. Then we add our 0.6 tenths to make one whole. So let's have a look at a second example. You can see it over here. So we're going to just show it on the number line again. This time, what do we need to add to 0.45 in order to make one whole? Well, the first thing I want to do is get to the next tenth, and the next tenth after 0.4 would be 0.5. So I'm adding here 0.05 as I'm already on 5 hundredths. I need 5 more to get to the next tenth. And if I'm on 0.5, I need to add, which is obviously 5 tenths, another 0.5 in order to get to the whole. So 0.05 and 0.5 all together, it means I need 0.55. And again, just a reminder, it obviously then wouldn't be 0.65 because that would give us 1.1. Let's have a look at this one then. This one is slightly different. This one says, what do I need to add to 3.4 to make 10? So this time, rather than going to the next 10, because we're already on the 10th of 4, we're going to go to the next whole number. So if we're on 3.4, our next whole number is going to be 4. Now how many more tenths do I need to add to get to that next whole number? I need to add on 6 tenths, which is 0.6. And then quite straightforward then, what do I need to add to 4 to get to 10? I need to add 6. So if I've got 6 and I've got 0.6 altogether, that makes 6.6. So what you're going to have a go at doing for me today then is you're going to choose a level of challenge. So you might decide you're going to start here with your tenths and how many more tenths do you need to add to make one whole. Then tenths and hundredths here to make one whole. Then obviously 3 digit numbers here. You've got ones, tenths and hundredths to try and make 10. And then quite a tricky challenge there, how to make 5. So choose your level of challenge and pause your video now. Okay, so here we have the answers then for you, and you can mark those at your leisure. We'd like to see how you got on with those today. So the main part of our session then is we are going to be continuing to look at decimals, and today we're going to have a go at rounding decimals. In order to be successful, we're going to need to use our knowledge of place value. We're going to need to use number lines as models to support us, and we're going to need to explain our reasoning really, really clearly. Now if we think back to rounding, we did lots of rounding back in the autumn term, and we try and still apply this knowledge to rounding particularly in addition and subtraction, and we'll also be looking later on in the year at how to do that with division and multiplication as well. But rounding in particular is really useful to help us to estimate calculations. Rounding is all about thinking about a number, imagining it on a number line and considering how close it is to a multiple of 10 perhaps, to a multiple of 1,000 or maybe tens of thousands, but also it might be, actually, if that's a decimal number, how close is that number to 1? So a little reminder of some work that we've done in the past. We need to round 134 to the nearest hundred. Now I want you to have a look at my number line. If I'm rounding 134 to the nearest hundred, do I need to think about which tens this number falls in between? Or do I need to think about actually what hundred this number falls in between? And yes, you're absolutely right. We need to think about actually, if we're rounding to the nearest hundred, we need to identify not the tenths, the multiples of 10 either side of this number. We need to imagine the multiples of 100. So we're going to take our number, and we've been asked to round it to the nearest hundred. So on our number line, we're identifying the 100 that came before this number and the multiple of 100 that would come after this number. Now there is obviously a rule. We can then look at the tens column, and if it's 4 or below, we're going to round it down low, or if it's 5 or above, we're going to round up. We can also think about where would we place this number on this number line. It wouldn't be over here, because we know that halfway is roughly 150, and it's less than 150, so it's probably roughly about here. Now obviously we do have a 3 in our tens column, which tells us we need to round down, but also by just seeing it on the number line, we can also see that the nearest hundred is going to be 100 there. So what we're going to do is apply this knowledge now to decimal numbers. So I've got the decimal number here, 3.4, and I'm being asked to round this number to the nearest whole number. The whole number that comes before 3.4 is 3. The whole number that comes after 3.4 is 4. Now, if it was roughly halfway would be 3.5. So, I would probably roughly place my number here, 3.4. And what we can do is look to the column to our right and see that we've got 4. 4 or below, we round down low. So the nearest whole number to 3.4 is 3. We can also see by placing our number on the number line that 3.4 is closer to 3 than it is to 4. Here's some more examples then. Rounding these numbers to the nearest whole number. We've got 2.6. Our whole number before is 2, our whole number after is 3. If I think about halfway being 2.5, 2.6 I place about here. Thinking about our rule, we can look to the number, the column to our right, that's 6. Remember we said 5 or above we round up high. And we can see on our number line also that 2.6 is closer to 3. Now this is an interesting one now. We've got 5.82. We've actually got 2 numbers after the decimal point rather than just 1. We've got tenths and we've got hundredths. But we're rounding this number to the nearest whole number. So again, the whole number that came before 5 point and a bit, 5 was the whole number that came before 5.82, and 6 is the whole number that comes after. We still only look to the column to our right and we can see that that's 8 tenths. So if 5.5, 5 tenths would be halfway, where we've got 8 tenths, we're probably looking at the number being up here. Hence why then, we're going to round up high again. And the same with this one. If we're thinking about looking at that column to the right, that 6 is the whole number before and 7 is the whole number after. That column to the right is a 7, so 5 or above we round up high. If we think about it on the number line, if 6.5 is halfway, we're probably going to place it about here, and we can see actually with all of these ones we're going to round up high. Slightly trickier now. This might be the point where yellow group, you might want to get started, or you might want to have a look at this next little challenge I'm just going to be showing you now, which is rounding numbers to the nearest tenth. So this time we've got 6.74. So 6.7 is obviously our tenth, our next tenth, or the nearest tenth that came before the number, and the next tenth that comes after the number, 1/10 more than 7/10 is 8/10, so it's 6.8. Now this time, because we're rounding to the nearest tenth, we're now actually needing to look at the next column to the right, which is the hundredths, which is a 4. So again, I'm going to think about my number being halfway would probably be 6.75, and this is 6.74, so it's just slightly less than half. And remember, 4 or below we round down low, so we're going to round down to 6.7. Couple more then, 7.49. Obviously the tenth before is 4, 7.4, the tenth after is 5. Here we've got a 9, so if we think about halfway would be 7.45, we're on 9, we're probably right up the end here, very, very close to our 5/10. Our 50 hundredths if you like, we've got 49 hundredths, and so we are going to be rounding up for that one. We've then got 6.35, so we've got 6.3 as the tenths before, 6.4 as the tenths after. We're going to look to the column to our right, which is a 5. That actually puts us dead on halfway. Remember we said 5 or above, 5 high 5, 5 or above we round up high. Finally, this last one can look trickier, but actually it's the same rules applying. 8.435, the tenth before is 4, so 8.4, the tenth after is 5, so 8.5, and we are just looking to that column to the right. It doesn't matter how many digits there are after, we've obviously got thousands here as well, but we're just looking to that next column to the right, which actually tells us we're placing it less than halfway, possibly about here, and we are rounding down low. 4 or below we round down low. So what you're going to be doing then for us today is you are going to be having a go at rounding different decimal numbers and having a look at some problems that may require some reasoning as well. For some of you, you may even look to rounding to the nearest hundredth, particularly blue group. You might want to watch this next example now. So if we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, 5.672, this is our hundredth here, which is a 7. So the 7th hundredths came before, 5.67. The hundredth that comes after is 5.68. So this time, again, same rule, looking to that column to our right, which is a 2, which tells me I'm less than halfway, so I'm roughly about here. 4 or below I rounded down low, and it was a 2, so I'm going to round down low to 5.67. And some of those might be a little bit tricky today, but that's quite a good challenge for you. And so you can see here, you might like to pause your video for an example of some waggles here, which just reminds you, you've got the number 2.65 and you're rounding to the nearest tenth. You're looking to that column to the right, which is obviously your hundredths column, that column to the right here, your hundredths for rounding to the nearest tenth. And when you're rounding to the nearest whole number, you're looking at that column to the right of the whole number, which is the tenths here. So we can see then that actually when we round to the nearest tenth, we would end up with 2.7, and to the nearest whole number, we would have 3. So rounding up for both of those. We look forward to seeing your work today.